Hey, welcome back everybody. Just wanted to go over World War II Barbarossa by Zvezda Games. This is from their Art of Tactic collection. So mostly this is just a wax lyrical kind of video. I'm not going to do like a full unboxing or a review. This might sound like a review, but it's just more of a thoughts that I had when I was making the decision to get this. Because I did take quite a bit of time to think about it. It was either, get into this Barbarossa or the Art of Tactic series in general, Art of Tactic, or get into like Tide of Iron, because both look very interesting to me. And those two games are compared to each other quite a bit. So it was kind of like, well, why would I get this? Because I actually asked one of my friends in a comment, Charles Cab from Historical Wargaming on YouTube, and he said he got rid of all of his Art of Tactic stuff and he went with Tide of Iron. So to me, I was like, well, that's a good endorsement, because I really respect his opinion. And so I got looking at the rules. There's a vassal module for Tide of Iron, and it plays fine. It's, from what I can tell, it's a squad level game. Your little squad of men, you can customize the figures that go on it. You have your individual tank units, and I like kind of tactical level games with squads and individual vehicles. So when I was looking then at Art of Tactic, what are the differences? A lot of it came down to the models, the things that you play with, and because I'm just a visual person, I'll just show you here. This is Memoir 44. I like Memoir 44. This is a great stuff that I can play with my kid, and my wife got me Eastern Front because I like the Eastern Front. So Barbarossa fit into that. So when you're talking about figures, Memoir 44 is a different scale than like Tide of Iron. I'm not sure where you put that operational, because you're moving units of men and stuff. So again, just kind of bear with me. But what's similar though is the miniatures. So with Tide of Iron, from what I was looking at, the miniatures, they aren't necessarily full model kits. They're going to look something similar to this from what I saw. They're definitely like more of a board game piece. Oh, I can open this most other days. I put the tape back on it. But if you can look without pulling it out, you can tell the tanks, they're like single molded, probably like two pieces stuck together, but they come pre-assembled. There's some detail on them, but they're pretty small. They're like in the 1/44 scale. Not terrible. And you get a bunch of them when you get a game like this, a whole bunch, because they're pretty easy to make. It's got artillery and some infantry. Infantry almost look like they're the 20mm scale, but it's a different standard of detail. So like, I'm cool, it's functional, and play the game and enjoy it, and everything fits in the box nice. And Tide of Iron is the same thing. When you was doing the vassal module, they had like pictures of the models that you're moving around. But again, very functional, it works. They both are what I call buckets of dice game. You have to roll a whole bunch of dice for your attack and your defense. This game, you definitely roll a whole bunch of dice for your attack. The defense is kind of baked into the cards. So really what kind of put me over was the models. So we do, I do a lot of, let's see, just zoom in a little bit here. I do a lot of like little wargaming model type reviews for you guys, put stuff together. And when I want to compare, say, like a Memoir 44 or Tide of Iron to something like this, I mean, this is great. It's a model kit essentially, and it's easy to put together. The Zvezda ones are real easy. Let's see, this had like the 2 tracks, the bottom hull, upper hull, the turret, one piece. Boom, there you go. It's like 5 parts later, and you're done. And it's great, very functional. Has a spot to put the unit marker flag, and off you go. So that, I think, was my primary determining factor. Not so much the gameplay, which is terrible, because when you talk about video games and stuff, you want gameplay over graphics. Well, for me, this is definitely where the graphics won out. So how's the gameplay? So prior to picking this up, I spent a lot of time on Board Game Geek looking at videos for Tide of Iron, also for what I could find for Operation Barbarossa. And then when I was playing the Vassal module for Tide of Iron, the two games play completely different. Tide of Iron is great because it's more traditional tactical type of game where, you know, when it's your turn, you do some things, you move your people. The Art of Tactic is definitely pre-plotting your moves and your turns, which is fine. It's a good, the gameplay is good. I played it with my son. My son liked it. It's complicated in the fact that there's a lot of things that your units can do. I'm holding the model. We'll talk about models. But what was nice though is they do include these cards. So the cards are nice because it has all of your unit statistic information. Tide of Iron had like a separate sheet that had the small unit stat cards, you know, the stat blocks, which is great. But the difference that really helps with this game here, Art of Tactic, was the fact that everything that your unit can do is on the back of the card. Now they have like some second edition cards that have a different layout. Let me just show you one here. And we'll talk about cards because they're good and they're a curse all at the same time. So here's kind of what one of the newer second edition cards look like. Just a little bit different layout, easier to read. So, but it contains your combat information and everything, and then your orders you mark on the back. So yeah, it's definitely a love-hate relationship with these cards because a couple of years ago I bought a whole bunch of these T-34 tanks so I could play them with miniature games in general. Mostly it was for Battle Group Kursk, and I was going to play in 15mm scale, which is perfect because that's what the Zvezda models come in, is this 15mm scale. Problem is, a couple years ago I never thought that I would play this game, so these cards were just lost to time, gone. And when I actually picked the game up and wanted to play, I had all these tanks and no way to use them because the game works one card per unit, which is fine because you just mark down here, there's a spot where you put the unit identification number, and then, so for example on this tank I put a 1 on the flag, and then if this was the tank card, it's not, but if it was a tank card I would just put a 1 in the unit box, and then I would know that these orders and this information I'm tracking are for this guy here when you play on the board. So that meant I had about 8 tanks, 4 T-34s and some Panzer IVs that were pretty much useless to me. So I asked, and some other people have asked on Board Game Geek, you know, where can we get these replacement cards? And the answer was you can't. You cannot buy the cards separately, which is a shame because I would pick them up for units that I lost. And the sad thing was, when I got my Operation Barbarossa box, I lost a card. Either it didn't have the card or I just straight up lost the card. And it's weird because I don't know how I lost the card. I hadn't even had the game like 2 days and I could not find my 45mm anti-tank gun that the Russians had. So I was essentially out. I couldn't use that. But, you know, when you're desperate enough, you'll find ways to fix stuff. So what I did was I went to the Zvezda website, the English website for the game, and they have a section where you can look at the models and, you know, purchase the models. And most of them include a picture of the model and like the box and how they look on the sprue. And it also includes front and back copies of the unit card, which is fantastic because then I just save the image, put it into a text editor, well, put it into my Microsoft Paint, and just pretty much printed it out. That's a whole other discussion how to make this because it's not easy trying to get the right size. I'm not very clever. This is the first ones I made. They came out about the size of like a playing card, and I just laminated them, and they're too small. Then I had to try and fiddle with print sizes. It's real tricky to try and replicate your Art of Tactic card. So the ones that come out the size of like baseball cards, they work. It's just you had to write small. So I got fine tipped markers to write on here. But you have to make your own cards. If you lose a card or a card is damaged, you have to make your own. So the game, as cool as it is to work on these cards, you're really handicapped by the fact that everything runs by the card. So fortunately, so here's a good news for folks. When I was just perusing, learning about the game, there was some videos that I saw in Russian where folks were playing, and I didn't see them use cards. Like, they might have had the card set off to the side as reference, but what they did was let's just unzoom a moment here, was they used an order sheet to track what their units were doing. And so what that does, and this is what I love because I love data cards, is it allows you to have your one data card as reference, so you know the strengths for attacking and whatnot, and then the backside where you would put all your orders, you can put on a sheet like this. So let's see if we can zoom this in just a little bit. There's a lot here. Oh yeah. Let's line this up. So, for example here, I have no idea on the page where I'm at right now. There we go. So you could put your unit. You would be able to put the unit number if you want. That way you know it's, tank 1. You're then, there we go. You can put the order. So if you have the card as reference, you could just look at the card. And so let's say, for example, here's one that I made for all the panzers I had to replace. If I just have this one card as reference, I can look, see what my orders are, and then boom, I just write in the order I want to do. And there's a spot to track your ammo, spot to track the fortitude, which is like your morale for that unit. Then you have these boxes off to the side where you can mark the hex, like if you're moving where you want to move, or you can write the hexes down inside the order. So this, I actually found this off Board Game Geek. I researched this, I wrote the name down this time. This is made by Patrick Van Gompel. Gompel, I hope I said that name correctly. I probably said it wrong, apologize. But Patrick, he posted this up. And this is awesome because it also has by turn. So it goes down to 12 turns. But there's a lot of boxes. So this order sheet is actually phenomenal because the problem that my son and I ran into when we're using the cards, let's just zoom out a little bit, I need a remote, is you have to have one card per model unit that you're running with. And the reason why that's kind of a pain is because then I had all these cards out. The game is not friendly when you want to start putting out lots and lots of units. So what I mean by lots, like 7. That's a lot for this game. That might not be a lot for a lot of games, but this is a lot because you're constantly, having to flip, mark your orders, and it's nice because the cards help you remember what each unit is doing. But the problem is when I'm constantly trying to flip these things around, sometimes my order was rubbing off. There was just, it's not convenient. For smaller games and some of the scenarios just run a few units per side, then the game runs beautifully. But as soon as you want to expand it out, have like several tank units per person, then it's done. It's difficult and it's hard. When you're trying to fit a game into an hour or so, it becomes even more daunting because you have all these cards you have to keep track of and flip and stuff like that. So an order sheet, this is a must. Something like this will allow you to play large games. And if you lose data cards or need them, instead of having to make, see, look, I homemade a whole bunch of these things. I had to buy lamination. I mean, you probably at home have a better way to make these things, but I had to make a whole bunch of my own cards, and that's a hassle. But with an order sheet, I wouldn't even have to make the card. I could just print out the one bit of information that I need, and then that would count and be available for every single unit. So that would be my recommendation for you, is if you really want to get into this game and you want to expand it out to larger battles, just go with an order sheet that you can download. There's some other ones that I found out there, but this this one worked the best so far. Alright, so that's pretty much about it for, let me zoom back out again, just kind of why I went with this game. So mostly it was for the models, and then the models are great, but to manage the models is difficult, but you know, the sheet helps in managing them, and then it lets you play these large scale battles. So we'll talk a little bit more about figure scale and terrain scale, which is another reason why I decided to go with this game, or why this game works as we compare it to other games. I just don't want to make this too long. So we'll pause here and we'll come back and make like a part 2, and then you can get some more thoughts. So if you have some of your own thoughts, please go ahead and share them, and then I'll be back with you for another video. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later. Bye.